Okay, Rabbi Sai, we spent a lot of time over the last 2 weeks talking about Ramban, and specifically with regards to how HaKadosh Baruch Hu engages with, interacts with, and how we are supposed to thus engage with and interact with the Ribono Shel Olam, especially with regards to Klal Yisrael being in Eretz Yisrael, and our relationship with Hashem as Elokei Haaretz, the God, the power that is controlling Eretz Yisrael b'dafka. We also pointed out that all of the promises of the Torah are for a statistically unlikely utopia. Not miraculous, statistically unlikely. This is what the Ramban refers to as nisim nistarim, hidden miracles. Hidden miracles do not mean a overt breaking of the rules and laws of nature, but things that are just incredibly and increasingly unlikely, right? That's how statistics works, right? The more regularly something super unlikely happens, the more that compounds the unlikeliness of that system being in place, right? Like flipping a coin, so it's 50-50 heads or tails. Each coin toss is a 50-50. But if you have a billion coin tosses, the likelihood of them all being heads or all being tails, that's fairly unlikely, right? That likelihood becomes far smaller. Impossible? No. Intensely improbable? Yes. That becomes intensely improbable. And yet, that is that's the reality of living in Eretz Yisrael with Hashgachas Hashem, is that things just work. Like everything works. Like you wake up in the morning, you get in your car, and it's green lights all the way to work. Every investment that you make is successful. Every bit of research that you do comes out gewaldig. Things just like work out, right? Right. Well, so maybe Rav Kook deals with that. My afternoon kollel seder with the BRS afternoon kollel. So we're talking about Rav Kook in Shabbos Haaretz. Hey, welcome. No problem. We're talking about Rav Kook in Shabbos Haaretz, where Rav Kook explains that there is a deep tension. There's this deep tension that exists between the capitalistic drive to build economies, which is like incredibly important. You don't build an economy without that, and the effects that competition has on people, on individuals. So Rav Kook writes that's the relationship between 6 years of working the field and then a year of cessation from competition, because ultimately it is the goal of humanity eventually is to be able to grow economies through collaboration rather than competition, which socialism attempted this and failed miserably at it. But the roots of this, communism tried very hard and failed incredibly miserably at it. At least the versions of communism that are well known throughout history. China today is an interesting China, but that's not for now. Right? That's a separate question. But that the goal ultimately is supposed to be that growth and development happens through collaboration. That is not Rav Kook's idea originally. It's in Svarim that came long before Rav Kook. Rav Nachman speaks about this in Likutei Moharan, that Chanukah, that the din of Chanukah is ad shetichla regel min hashuk, is that everybody should leave the marketplace. Well, what does it mean? Everybody should leave the marketplace, because the marketplace is the place of competition, the place of milchama. But if everybody would want the same thing, then there would be no competition. So you wouldn't be able, meaning you wouldn't be able to have a buyer and a seller. If everybody wanted exactly the same, meaning if both the buyer and the seller wanted the same thing, if they had shalom between them, then there would be no business. There'd be no marketplace. Marketplace only exists because there are disparities in what people want and what people have, which means that people don't see eye to eye in the way that they live. But in theory, if everybody would be able to produce using their own creativity and ingenuity to the extent that everything would be able to be produced in mass abundance, then there would be no competition, there'd be no market, there would just be right. There would just be enough of everything for everyone, in theory, which is somewhat arguably of what Gan Eden was Mikedem, right? Beganin Mikedem.
But presumably, this is also a fallible system, and if you're living in the system, even if it's working out well, you theoretically should be able to mess up the system just as we had before.
Yes.
So it's not really end game exactly.
How can it be stably that way?
Right.
Yeah. So that's how the Psukim describe in Bechukasa and Kisava, is that it is not stable. It is dependent on you being an Eved Hashem.
So it could just be a temporary point of time like Shlomo Melech.
Well, yeah, arguably, meaning. Well, we haven't gotten to what exactly Mashiach is yet.
The purpose of the first entry is there supposed to be this way?
Yes, I mean, and at the very least, it is a stage. It is a stage that we need to master in order to get to what happens next. We haven't done that yet, right? That's the Nakuda. Is that this is supposed to be like Shlav Aleph is that everybody is supposed to be collectively, collaboratively being over the Hashem, keeping all of the mitzvahs, and then life gets to the point where everything is amazing. And then we can talk about what happens next. We haven't gotten there yet. We have not gotten there. We didn't get there in the times of Yehoshua. We started to get there, arguably in the days of Shlomo Melech, and then it was mission abort, right? We couldn't sustain it. That was unsustainable, and we'll get there when we get to Sefer Shmuel and Sefer Malachim. We'll talk about what exactly those things are about. But before we can get there, there is a critical turning point. That is the entirety of Perek Hay in Sefer Yehoshua. And it's kedai even just to read this together inside and take note of much of the strangeness that is in this parak. And the title that I gave this year, I think aptly named, is Echoes of Histories Past. Because basically everything that has happened in all of Jewish history is referenced in this parak, which is pretty cool. Let's we'll zoom in a little larger there, and then we'll do like this. Okay, they have just crossed over the Yarden, and we spoke about the big Hagba, right? The big Hagba of the Luchos, as meaning the tablets, which somewhat akin to the Luchos of Moshe, are these big tablets of Yehoshua, and the carrying of the bris of the Luchos across the Yarden, all of reality folding into the presence of Hashem as the Aaron crosses over. The promise that Yehoshua makes, like Chazal tell us, the promise that Yehoshua makes, Bnei Yisrael swear, we will do what you tell us that we need to do, akin to Har Sinai and akin to the Gemara in Nida, that before a baby is born, Mashbiyan I say, that they make him swear that you're going to be a tzaddik, you're not going to be a rasha. This is the birth, the crossing through the Yarden is basically the birth canal of the Jewish people. Right? We are entering into Eretz Yisrael. Now, Perek Hay begins, Vayhi chishma kol malchei amari asher ba'eva hayarden yama v'chol malchei aknani asher al hayam es asher havish Hashem es mei hayarden mibnei bnei Yisrael ad Avram v'yamas levavam v'loy hayavam oid ruach mibnei bnei Yisrael. When all of the kings of the Emirates that were on the other side of the Jordan River, and all of the kings of Canaan that were on the Mediterranean coast, here that Hashem has dried up the Yarden because of Bnei Yisrael, Ad, and this is interesting to point out, Ad Avram, that's the Kri. The Ksiv, the way that it's written in the Tanakh is Avarnu. Ad Avarnu. So Vayimas Levavam, their hearts melted, and they had no longer any ruach. They had no wind because of the Jewish people. Now, a couple of things to point out, and there's a lot of nekudas to say here. That Ksav and Kri is interesting for two reasons. One, Ad Avram, until they passed, that's the story. Ad Avarnu, until we passed, so We've noted a number of times in different shiurim over, the last 2 years, that all of Torah and all of Tanakh is talking to all of us all the time. Which is why the din is that when you see the place that, if we exactly could figure out, but if you see the place that Klal Yisrael crossed over the Yarden, you say the bracha she'asa neis lava yisenu b'makam hazeh. Hashem, you made a miracle for our ancestors in this place. Because all of Jewish history is the continuum of what happened since Yetzias Mitzrayim and onwards, right? So, b'chol davar chayav adam liras atzma kilo hu yatsa mitzrayim. So everybody has to see themselves when you sitting at the seder as if you have just come out of Mitzrayim. It doesn't mean that afterwards you don't see that. It means that you are still part of that story. It is a reminder once again at Leil HaSeder that you're supposed to continue with that. But that is pshat, and some of the Mefarshim point that out here. The other thing to note is that who is the author of Sefer Yehoshua? Yehoshua, right? Meaning Ad Avram, yeah, that is until they pass, but he's also writing this in first person. Yeah. Meaning this miracle is kedai for us to feel as Yehoshua does. That's the point here, right? We feel that we are also crossing over, we cross with Yehoshua here. We, 3,000 years later, are feeling this. All of their hearts melted, that they had no spirit to stand up in front, in the face of Bnei Yisrael. There's a couple of things to point out here. Aleph is, this is exactly what Rachav told the two spies, right? That they've heard that you're coming, and they no longer have any ruach. That's Aleph. Beis is now you have a essential follow-up question, which is?
She said it already happened before the Yarden dried up or split, then how did it happen?
So
Yarden didn't cause it.
Correct. So this is dovetailing the thing that Rachav mentions is what freaked him out the first time, which was Kriyas Yamsuf. Namogu kol yoshvei Canaan. Right? We've been fearful of this for 40 years already, since Kriyas Yamsuf. We've been worried about this since Kriyas Yamsuf. And now we hear that you're coming, so this is the tensions are rising once again, and then this happens. So, this is now we pointed out that Kriyas Yamsuf and the splitting of the Yarden do parallel each other in many, many ways, as we say in Tehillim, right? Hayom Rav Ayanos, Hayarden Yisav Leachar. Either that happens simultaneously, or these are two sides of the same coin. To a certain extent, the effect of that is the same thing to the residents of Canaan. So, point well taken. We could say very simply that this is the experience heightening, which means, what would you do if you are a king of Canaan right now? Surrender or flee? And they don't. And that's weird. Right? Meaning the Tanakh is telling us, Navi is saying very clearly that there's this feeling that they know they're going to lose. They know they're going to lose. And yet, aside from one small group of Canaanite residents who flee, no one else does. 6 out of 7 nations stay to fight. Why? Why do they stay to fight? So that question we are going to leave as an open question at the moment, but it clearly arises from this. Givonim come later.
But they make a treaty. I'm saying there's another one example.
Right.
Of somebody at least giving up.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but everybody else doesn't. Okay, Ba'isahi, at this point in time, Amar Hashem el Yehoshua. Hashem says to Yehoshua, Asay lecha charvos tzurim, make for yourselves charvos tzurim. What are charvos tzurim? Okay, so this is a machlokes. This is machlokes what charvos tzurim means. We'll talk about it in a moment. Veshuv mol es bnei Yisrael shenis, and circumcise the Jewish people once again. Now, there's a lot of questions to ask here. Circumcise the Jewish people once again? What do you mean? It's one of the few things that you can really only do once. Not a lot of other options thereafter, right? So we'll see a little bit later that the Navi says in this parak that there were many, many, many people that were not gemalt. They didn't have a bris milah. Because for 40 years in the desert, many Jews did not get a bris milah, and we'll talk about why. But the language of shenis is fascinating by itself. Because Hashem doesn't say to Yehoshua, give a bris milah to all the people that don't have a bris milah. He says, give a bris milah to them again. Now, what does again mean? So, Chazal point out that this again is the introduction of another step of bris milah. Bris milah we know of as the removal of the foreskin. That's called milah. But bris milah today does not just contain the removal of the foreskin. It is also priya. There is milah, which is the removal of the foreskin, and then there's priya, which is the splitting of the membrane underneath it. Now, without getting into the graphic details, those two things are both ma'akev. The Gemara tells us, Mishnah tells us that mal v'lo para kil lo mal. If you gave a bris milah and you didn't do priya, so then you haven't done a bris milah. There was the Ramah quotes this, the minhag in Yerushalayim, and this the Ramah doesn't quote it as minhag Yerushalayim, but this was a minhag in Yerushalayim, was to be mechabe two different ma'alim, one with milah and one with priya. Right? There are two distinct steps of the bris milah. Right? So if you had two big tzaddikim that were both ma'alim that showed up to the bris, so you don't know what to do. So you can say, okay, you'll do the milah, you'll do the priya. Both of them are chiyuvim. Chazal note that this is where the mitzvah of priya is introduced. Now there are a lot of questions to ask on that Maimar Chazal. And if we have time this evening, we can start with a Meshech Chachma that deals with this. Meshech Chachma in the beginning of Sefer Shmos. It deals with this question of, well, I'll say it out. It kind of sounds like Yehoshua is introducing a chiv mid'oraisa, right? Super problematic. The Rambam should be jumping up and down and saying, "Are you out of your mind?" Only Moshe Rabbeinu is Torah. Everybody else is Nevuah, right? Moshe Rabbeinu is. We don't have mitzvahs that come after Moshe Rabbeinu, at least not in our religion, right? After Moshe Rabbeinu, that is the end of Hashem giving mitzvahs. There are many, many things that Hashem says to the Nevi'im. Many of them are hara shah, right? Do this at this point in time. But to introduce something as this is the mitzvah for all future generations, we have 630 mitzvahs. That's it. That is it. How is Yehoshua introducing a new aspect to that mitzvah? That's a lot to talk about. The language of Charvos Surim is interesting. And there are some interesting nafkaminas in both directions. Charvos Surim can either mean, Rashi tells us, Rashi is of the opinion that Charvos Surim means sharp knives, from the lashon of cherev, right? Tzur, meaning sharp. So Charvos, right? Blades that are tzurim, that are sharp. The Malbim and the Chasam Sofer and a number of other Mepharshim, there are Dak points out, if I'm not mistaken, that Charvos Tzurim is that the language of Charvos Tzurim is not on the word cherev, but on the word tzur. What's a tzur? Stone. Right? Charvos means sharpened stones. So either Charvos Tzurim means a blade or it means stones. And some of the Achronim have noted that it seems to be that there is a preference, at least according to Rashi, in doing a bris milah with a knife, with a blade. That is a preference because of Rashi's understanding of Charvos Tzurim. That Hashem tells Yehoshua, make sure that you have sharp blades. Right? There are others that suggest that the problem of using a knife here is this is a halachic topic beyond the scope of this particular shir, but it's just worth pointing it out. What date is this all taking place? That they crossed over the Yarden? This is the 10th day of the month of Nisan, right? What are they going to be doing in 4 days' time? Korban Pesach. In order to bring a Korban Pesach, you need to be tahar. You need to be pure, right? You need ritual purity. There is a unique din of a blade, which is called by Chazal, Cherev Hareu Kechalal, that a blade contracts impurity at the same degree as the thing that it came in contact with. Specifically, a blade that came in contact with a dead body. Now, the blade that came in contact with the dead body has the tumah of the dead body. Contracts the tumah of the dead body. And to that end, Some of the Mefarshim, we're not going to get into the details here, but some of the Mefarshim argue that Hashem was dafka telling Yehoshua, use stones and not blades, so that you should ensure that everybody is still tahar by the time it gets to Korban Pesach. But that discussion notwithstanding, the introduction of a new aspect of Bris Milah is interesting from many, many halachic standpoints and philosophical standpoints that hopefully we'll get to a little bit this evening. Now, Vayas la Yehoshua charvas tzurim. Yehoshua does this. He makes other blades of the stones. Vayamal es bnei Yisrael el givas ha'aralos. He circumcises the Jewish people on this mountain called Givas ha'aralos, Milah mountain, right? That's the hilltop, right? This is Bris Milah mountain. That's what we're doing here. Okay. V'zeh hadavar asher mal Yehoshua kol ha'am hayotzim mitzrayim hazacharim. So this is what happened. Yehoshua, it seems, Yehoshua himself gives a Bris Milah to everybody that came out of Mitzrayim. Kol ha'am hayotzim mitzrayim hazacharim, the males. Kol anshe ha'milchama mesu b'midbar b'derech b'tzeisam mitzrayim. All the people that came out of Mitzrayim had died, right? Anybody from the age of 20 to 60, all the Anshe Milchama, anybody from the age of 20 to 60, they came to Mitzrayim, they had died. So Yehoshua has to give a Bris Milah now to everybody else. Ki mulim hayu kol ha'am hayotzim. Everybody that came out had a Bris Milah. V'chol ha'am hayilodim b'midbar b'derech b'tzeisam mitzrayim lo malu. But everybody that was born in the desert did not get a Bris Milah. Ki 40 shana halchu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar ad tom kol hagai anshe milchama hayotzim mitzrayim. Because Bnei Yisrael walked 40 years in the desert until the end of that entire generation, the Anshe HaMilchama, the people of that battle, the Anshe HaMilchama, Hayotzim Mitzrayim. It's interesting that the Tanakh refers to them as the Anshe HaMilchama, the people of war. Which war? Right? So keep that in mind. Hayotzim Mitzrayim, that all came out of Mitzrayim. Asher lo yishomu b'kol Hashem. They did not listen to the voice of Hashem. Asher nishba Hashem lahem, that Hashem swore to them, levilti arasamas aretz, that He's not going to show them the land. Asher nishba Hashem lahavasam, that Hashem had sworn to give to their ancestors. Laseis lanu eretz v'aschala b'dvash, the land flowing with milk and honey. Right? Meaning the framing of this is interesting on many, many levels. There is these Anshe Milchama that came out of Mitzrayim. They all got a Bris Milah, but then they didn't listen to Hashem. So they didn't get the land. Asher nishba Hashem lahem levilti to not let them see the land that Hashem had sworn to their ancestors to give to us, the land flowing with milk and honey. Yeah.
Doesn't it seem like the second event isn't necessarily prayer, but a second mass Brit Milah?
Yes. Good question. We'll get there. Ve'es b'nehem hekim tachtam, and then they established their children of them. Right? Osam mal Yehoshua. Those are the ones that Yehoshua gave Bris Milah to. Ki are lim hayu, because they were uncircumcised. Ki loy malu osam badarach, because they did not give them Bris Milah along the way. Vayihi kasher tamu kol hagai le himal, and it was after Yehoshua had finished giving everybody Bris Milah. Vayeshvu sachtam b'machane ad chayosam, and then they camped out until Chayosam, seems until they got better. Now, this is, in terms of military strategy, this is a very bad plan. Very bad plan. Why? We've had a story like this once upon a time.
Well, that's the third day.
Right. Shimon and Levi go to Shechem, and in order to dispatch the entire city in an afternoon, they convinced them all to have a Bris Milah. Shkoyach. And it was on the third day that they were all in pain, and Shimon and Levi, seems by themselves, walked through the city of Shechem, and so basically Bnei Yisrael are placing themselves as sitting ducks on a mountaintop. This is a bad idea. V'yeshvu tachtam b'machaneh. They sat beneath them. Meaning, kasher tamu kol hagoy li'imol vayeshu tachtam b'machane ad chayasam, that they sat under the mountaintop, it seems to be. Meaning, it's a good question. Yes. Well, we're going to come back to all of these points. Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua, hayom galosi es charpas mitzrayim me'alechem. Hashem then says to Yehoshua, I have galosi, I have revealed, meaning I've peeled away from you, as charpas mitzrayim me'alechem, the shame of Egypt from you. Vayikra shem hamakom hahu Gilgal ad hayom hazeh. This place is called Gilgal, which means the place of revelation, right? It was galui, it was revealed, right? This is where the shame of Egypt is peeled away, that they have now been revealed without the shame of Mitzrayim. Vayachanu b'nei Yisrael b'Gilgal. They camped in Gilgal. Vayasu es haPesach. And then, for the very first time since the second year of Mitzrayim, so now it's been 40 years, they had Pesach Mitzrayim, and then they had Pesach in the Midbar, right? The Pesach in the Midbar in the first year anniversary of Yetzias Mitzrayim, they had Pesach Midbar. And now they finally had Pesach once again. Vayasu es haPesach, ba'arba asar yom lachodesh ba'erev ba'arvos Yericho. They offer the Korban Pesach on the 14th day of that month, the month of Nisan, ba'erev, that night, or that late afternoon going into night, ba'arvos Yericho, next Yericho. Va'yochlu me'avur ha'aretz mimacharas ha'Pesach, and they ate me'avur ha'aretz mimacharas ha'Pesach matzos v'kalui be'etzem hayom hazeh, and they ate already matzos on that day. Vayishbos haman mimacharas, and the next day, the day immediately after Pesach, was the last day that the man fell. Right? No more man. Vayishbos haman mimacharas be'achlam me'avur ha'aretz, once they were now eating from the land. V'lo haya od livnei Yisrael man, they no longer had man. Vayachlu mitvos eretz Canaan b'shana hahi, and they already ate from the yield of the land of Canaan in that year. Meaning they were already harvesting from, that wasn't their own crops, clearly. It was crops from people that they had conquered. Unlikely that within a couple of minutes you'd be able to plant and grow. It doesn't sound like that. They ate from the yield of Eretz Canaan already in that year. So let's just point out what we've noted so far. So far what we have is Bris Milah. We have Pesach. We have the story, the end of the story of the man. And now, and the Gemara Megillah has a lot to say about this particular episode. Most people, at least most guys, learn it probably for the first time for real in the Gemara Megillah. We're going to see it in the Psukim first. Pasuk says, "Vayhi biyos Yehoshua b'Yericho." When Yehoshua was in Yericho, now not in the city of Yericho, he's in the area of Yericho. Vayisa inav, he lifts up his eyes. Vayar, and he sees v'hinei ish omed lenegdo, that there is a man standing opposite him. V'charbo shlufa biado, and there is a sword in his hand. That's terrifying. Vayelech Yehoshua elav, Yehoshua walks to him. Vayomer lo, halanu ata im letzarenu, are you with us or against us? Who are you? Who are you? Are you with us or are you against us? Vayomer, he says, lo. What does lo mean? Neither. Meaning, whatever you're assuming about me is incorrect. I'll tell you who I am. Ki ani sar tzva Hashem. I am the officer of the army of Hashem. Ata vasi. I have come now. It's on these words, Ata vasi, that the Gemara Megillah has a lot to say. Vayipol Yehoshua el panav. Yehoshua falls on his face, arza, on the ground. Vayishtachu, and he bows. He says, Vayomer lo, ma adoni midaber el avdo. What is it that you wish to say to me? So Yehoshua does not know that this is a Malach Hashem, that this is Sar Tzva Hashem. And he says, I have come now. Now as opposed to? What do you mean? I've come now. I've come now as opposed to. Keep that in mind. Vayomer Sar Tzva Hashem el Yehoshua. This is what I want to say to you. The Sar Tzva Hashem says to Yehoshua, Shal na'alcha me'al raglecha. Take your shoe off your feet. Ki hamakom asher ata omed alav kodesh hu. Because the place upon which you stand is transcendent ground. Vayash Yehoshua ken, Yehoshua does so. Now, this is like echoes of history's past. Bris Milah, Man, an angel commanding someone to take their feet off because of the transcendence of the ground. What is going on in this parak? Like, what is this whole parak about? So there is a lot. There is a lot. And perhaps to go a little in order, it is worth taking a look at the Meshech Chochmah at the beginning of Sefer Shmos. Get to Sefer Shmos. I think this is in the Hagdamos section here. Meshech Chochmah. There we go. Okay. Text not found. But it is. Here it is. Okay. Now, the Meshech Chochmah has a number of very, very important Hakdamos. The most well-known of the Meshech Chochmah's introductions is his introduction to Sefer Vayikra, where he talks about the argument between the Rambam and the Ramban with regards to Korbanos. That's the one that is more well-known. But arguably, at least I would argue, that his introduction to Sefer Shmos has far further reaching implications for the way that we understand like Torah and Masorah and Torah Shevichsav, Torah Shebal Peh, Nevuah, as well as Bechira, right? And the notion of freedom of choice. All of that is wrapped into this Hakdama, and I don't know if we'll have time to go through all of it, but we'll begin. Because Perek Hey of Sefer Yehoshua is a very Moshe-centric parak, right? It is, Chazal tell us, Hashem telling Yehoshua, I'm going to give you a mitzvah. Go and give them all a bris milah. And that mitzvah is now dovetailing on the mitzvah of bris milah in the Torah. And Yehoshua does all of this. And then there is this angel that shows up, whose identity we'll discuss in just one moment. And then there is this, take your shoes off because kind of sounds like you're like Moshe. What is the identity of this angel? So Pashtus is that after the Chet HaEgel, Hashem says to Moshe, I'm going to send a malach in front of you. And Moshe says, I don't want the malach. Either you come with us or we're not going. Al Talenu, he said, don't take us into the land of Israel unless you're coming with us. So now the angel comes. This is the malach that Moshe had turned down. Atabasi. Now I've come. And we'll see that inside probably next week. So let's understand the relationship between Moshe and Yehoshua with regards to Nevuah and Bechira, freedom of choice, and Torah. Says the Meshech Chochmah, Nevuah's Moshe, who l'malam min Nevuah's kol hanavim. Moshe Rabbeinu, and this is, by the way, this is patented directly after the Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. This is where the Meshech Chochmah is coming from. In this Hagdama, when in most places the Meshech Chochmah refers to Rabbeinu, he's talking about the Rambam. You should remember that the Meshech Chochmah is also the author of the Or Samech, right? Same guy. There's just fun fact. There's an interesting those that have academic training in the world of academia will appreciate the story tremendously. The Meshech Chochmah, right, Ramesh Simcha of Dvinsk, aside from being like an Ilui and a Rav and an enormous Talmud Chacham, he authored two works that are incredibly well known. One is the Meshech Chochmah, which is Al HaTorah, and the other one is the Or Samech, which is on the Rambam. Which one did he write first? Meshech Chochmah. Which one did he publish first? Or Samech. Why? Because they told him, people that loved him and were close to him, if you publish first on Chumash, they won't take you seriously when you publish on Rambam. Publish on the Rambam first, publish Lumdus first, and then they'll take you seriously when you publish on Chumash. Otherwise, you just become one of those guys that are like, okay, wrote a nice book on Chumash. They won't take you seriously when you write about the Rambam. Your first foray, your first publication needs to be in the most respectable field, and then you can say whatever else you want. Right? Astute in the world of academia. They right. That's yeah. Okay. So Nevuas Moshe hu l'mala min Nevuas kol hanavim. Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah is distinct from all of the other Nevi'im. She Nevuas kulam hu al pi os umofes. Because all of them were through an os and a mofes, meaning signs and wonders. V'chol hamamin ba'oses yesh b'libo doifi. And anybody that believes in signs and wonders, if that's the only reason that you believe in them, you're a fool. What does that mean? Well, al pi os umofes. So, in order to know that all of the later Nevi'im are Nevi'im, they needed to prove themselves, right? They needed to prove themselves. That's how the Psukim describe them. So if you're Shoftim, how do you know that a Navi is a Navi? So if he tells you something and then that thing happens, right? So there has to be a sign and a wonder. There has to be some indication that this guy is a Navi. Now, the Rambam tells us that anybody that believes in things exclusively because they see signs and wonders is Yesh Beliba Daifi, which translates probably best to they're an idiot, right? Anybody that believes in things just because they see cool tricks is a moron. That's not why intelligent people believe things. The other way, if you don't want to do tricks, is you need to get smicha from a navi, right? Meaning the smicha in halacha, you're able to say that you are a continua of the Masorah from Moshe, right? That was the original smicha. There's also smicha as a navi, to say that you are a navi. You don't need to do cheap tricks. No tricks for you. You get to be a navi. Now, the Rambam has this as a basic premise. He writes this in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, in Perek Zayin, Perek Ches, and the Rambam is not mincing his words. The reason that he is saying what he's saying and writing what he is writing, and much of the basis of the Rambam's philosophy, is because Christianity bases itself on signs and wonders, right? That the veracity of Yashka is only as a result of signs and wonders, right? He did miraculous things. So the Rambam says doing miraculous things is, as a certain serial would say, tricks are for kids, right? That's for Anashim Pshutim. What are you tricks for? No, you should be. You should understand with the profundity of intellectual acumen and philosophical inquiry, a person should develop a deep understanding of what is right and what is wrong. Tricks are not ma'aleh and not murid, and this is effectively the Rambam's way of saying. And by the way, Christianity is for the same chevra as the cereal, right? That's somebody sent me a meme. It's a shtickle cruel, but it's hilarious. Of an AA meeting, and a guy with like long hair and robes by the water cooler. The caption saying, "Everybody at the AA meeting got nervous when Jesus walked past the water cooler." Right? That's yeah. So okay, Rambam says tricks are for kids. So the Meshech Chochmah begins that Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah is distinct. It is distinct. It does not rely on signs and wonders. Raksha Torah Amra Lahamin Lanavi Shemara Osumafis Kamosh Tzivsa Lahamin Laedim. The Torah tells us that we should trust a Navi that produces signs and wonders the same way that the Torah tells us that we should trust two witnesses. Now, is two witnesses ironclad proof? Practically, is it ironclad proof? No. But the Torah tells us that this is the standard of proof, right? Doesn't mean that it's impossible to refute. No. Doesn't mean that it's impossible to you know. Correct. Can be falsified. You have Eidim Zomim, two other witnesses that can falsify that. Two witnesses is not ironclad proof. Says the Meshech Chochmah, signs and wonders is also not ironclad proof. The Navi comes along and says, I'm a Navi, so he produces, that's pretty good. It's pretty good, right? We should listen to him. Doesn't mean that it's impossible to falsify. No. I mean, it puts the Navi on the hook in like a serious way for potentially being a Navi Sheker. Once they've proven themselves to be a Navi, then they could also be a Navi Sheker, right? A Navi Sheker, by the way, is not somebody that says, I'm a prophet, but they're not a prophet. It's not a guy that fails at the signs and wonders, right? That guy's just called a clown, right? So I'm a prophet, do a sign. This is going to turn purple. And then it doesn't. You're not a Navi Sheker, you're just lying, right? A Navi Sheker is somebody that's verified as a Navi and then becomes a Navi Sheker. Says, a Navi, this is important to understand, is capable of lying. Right? It's capable of lying. He says, "V'chananya ben Azar yoichir shaya Navi emes v'losev nasish Navi sheker." It's possible that a person could be a Navi emes and become a Navi sheker. K'may shamar perika nechnachim like the Gemara says. Like Cain Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is distinct in two ways. But most important for our discussion is, this is you're going to spin on this for a while. And you'll see it relates to the Parshas HaShavua in the weirdest way that you would imagine. It is opposite from anything that you've thought. He says, Loichein Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is not like all other Nevi'im. Why? One is that the entirety of the Jewish people witnessed that Hashem spoke to Moshe. Our mass revelation included in that the mass revelation of Hashem speaking to Moshe. We all collectively witnessed Hashem speaking to Moshe. Why do we trust Moshe thereafter? Because we saw Hashem speak to him. We know that Hashem speaks to Moshe. As opposed to the Navi that does a trick. Does an ois and a mofes. Moshe we trust, Moshe we believe because we saw that Hashem is speaking to him. That is first-hand, right? That is eyewitness account. It says, V'kulam higiu lamalas hanavua. Every single Jew experienced nevuah at that point in time. V'ro eich HaKadosh Baruch Hu medaber imo. And witness how Hashem was speaking to Moshe. Lachein Amar, and therefore, the pasuk says, "Hineni ba elecha ba'av ha'anan ba'avur yishmeu." Pasuk says explicitly, and Meshech Chochmah makes this point as well on this pasuk in Parshas Yisro. Hashem says to Moshe, "I am coming to you in the thickness of a cloud." Means I'm coming to you in a way that is far less lofty than how you are usually speaking to me, so that everybody else will be able to appreciate how we're speaking to each other. Lemashal. There are, and we've noted this before, there are different kinds of I don't know in the world. Right? There is Real Blumenthal saying, I don't know what happens at the event horizon of a black hole. And then there is Stephen Hawking saying, I don't know what happens at the event horizon of a black hole. My I don't know and his I don't know are not the same I don't know. Yes? That's a very different I don't know. This is a problem that people have in general with how to understand accepting information, the doctors that have been dealing with the pandemic for the last 2 years on the front lines have experienced this and noted this to me many, many, many times, is that there is a difference between saying, medically, we don't know what the best kind of treatment is. It could be this, it could be that, it could be that, it could be that. It's not the same thing as saying, we have no idea what we're talking about and everybody can do anything they want. That's different. There's different I don't knows. Now, at Matan Torah, similarly, there were different levels of nevuah. There is the level of nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, which we have no idea how to comprehend even a little bit. Meaning, Nevi'im had no idea how to comprehend even a little bit. And then there is the level of nevuah that at the very least allows you to appreciate Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah. So if I would sit in on, a lecture of astrophysics that's like dumbed down, I might get an inkling of what it means to understand the event horizon of a black hole at the level of like Nobel Prize winning physicists. I might get like an inkling of that. Maybe. So I might have a higher level of I don't know and a much deeper level of appreciation of what they do know. Says the Meshech Chochmah, that's what Klal Yisrael experiences at Har Sinai. They're not Nevi'im, but Hashem makes them all Nevi'im enough that they can experience that Moshe Rabbeinu is super Navi. And they go, whoa, okay, we trust this guy. Meaning, I now understand that this is real, that this is the case. Says, the end of the pasuk is, and then they will believe in you forever. They'll believe in you forever. Because for as long as they were only believing that Moshe Rabbeinu was true and real, because the signs and wonders come in Mitzrayim, another Navi could come along and be like, yo, I've got another trick to show you. Forget about that guy. Remember this guy? Yeah, okay. In fact, to a large extent, this is what the Chartumei Mitzrayim were attempting. Right? The Egyptian too says, Moshe, you did a trick, so we'll do a trick. And then people will know that your tricks are not so important. So Shiyira Oisez Mavdim. Loi Kain Achshav. This is not the case. Af im yavo elef ravavos neviim ba'oisez Mavdim. Loimar b'shem Hashem l'shanos kotzer shel yud mitaras Moshe loi nishma lo. If tens of thousands of prophets would come and say to erase even the top of a yud in the Torah of Moshe, we would not listen to them, and the mitzvah is to kill them. Kedin nevi'ei sheker. We put them to death. The Torah is immutable. It doesn't change. It is now and forever. Torah's Moshe is forever. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu does not give us nevuah, he gives us Torah. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. It's not the same thing as nevuah. This is not prophecy. This is Torah. He says, Kevan she'al nevuas Moshe anu edim be'atzmeinu, because we are first-hand witnesses to the nevuah of Moshe. And this is what the Torah tells us, that we all believe in Moshe thereafter. It says, V'duk b'chol divrei Rabbeinu v'hilchos Yisrael. Torah perek zayin ches, ki kol dvarim kedoshim uv'ruach nevuah amram b'li safek. Says the Meshech Chochmah, everything that I've said is basically drawn from perek zayin and ches of the Rambam's Yisrael Torah, and you should listen to them because he wrote them with ruach nevuah. That's high praise, right? That's it's a big deal. What the Meshech Chochmah is saying about the Rambam is, this is on point. This is everything that you need. Okay. Now, it's kedai to point out that the first time that this lesson is revealed is not actually at Har Sinai. The preamble to this conversation, the Rambam points out, happened at the burning bush. So, we'll skip over to the burning bush for just a moment. So Moshe is this shepherd, and he is following the sheep, and has this conversation with Hashem by the snare. And Hashem says to Moshe, you're going to take the people out of Mitzrayim. I'm going to take them out. To bring them out of that land to this good land, Eretz Zvas Chalav Dvash. El Makom HaKanani V'Achidi V'Amar Priz V'Achivi. This is the land of these nations. And Pasuk Yud V'Ata Lecha V'Shalcha Al Param. I'm going to send you to Paro. V'Hod says, Ami B'nai Yisrael Mitzrayim. And you're going to take my nation out of Mitzrayim. V'Yom Moshe Elai Elokim. Moshe says, Mi Anachi Ki Elech Al Paro. V'Chi Yotzi Es B'nai Yisrael Mitzrayim. Who am I? Vayomer ki yeyimach, I'm going to be with you. V'zet lecha ha'os, ki anachi shalachti, ch'batziacha es ha'am Mitzrayim, tabdun es ha'elokim al ha'har hazeh. This will be the sign for you. When I take you out of, when you take them out of Mitzrayim, they will serve Hashem on this mountain. What's this mountain? Which mountain? Har Sinai. The mountain that the snare happens, Chorev, that's Har Sinai. Hashem says to Moshe, once you've taken them out of Mitzrayim, you will serve Hashem on this mountain. So the Rambam points out, what's the conversation here? Moshe is saying, you're going to send me out, you're going to send me to Mitzrayim, and I'm going to do all of these like signs and miracles and wonders, right? But if they believe in me, that I am legit, and believe in you, Hashem, that you are real as a result of signs and wonders, then they are idiots. Hashem says to Moshe, no, Moshe, don't worry. They're going to come to this mountain, and then they will see that Moshe Emes Sarasa Emes, and what I'm telling you is Nevuah, and they will understand this with a level of sophistication that is far beyond tricks off for kids. That's what's going on in this conversation.
Doesn't work. He's saying, who am I to take them out?
Yeah.
And he's saying, I'll give you a sign at Har Sinai, which is actually taking them out.
Yes. So he says, yes, there will be a process, and during this process, they won't get it. But they will at Har Sinai. Don't worry, they'll get it. They're not going to get it. Now, the Ramban is chalek on this. The Ramban thinks that the educational curriculum of the Makos is part of instilling emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the whole thing. And there's what to be medayik in the Ramban and the end of Parshas, but not for now. But understand that this is where the Meshech Chochmah is coming from, that Moshe Rabbeinu's level of Nevuah is different and distinct from everybody else's level of Nevuah. Now, here's the question. This is a question that I'm surprised does not come up in more like high school classrooms. It should, right? This is a question that once you hear it, it is going to bother you. Everybody witnesses Moshe being the Adon HaNeviim, receiving the Torah on Har Sinai. What did we hear from Hashem? Either the Aseret HaDibros, or all of the Aseret HaDibros at once, or only the first two Aseret HaDibros. One thing with absolute certainty, we did not hear the entirety of the Tariq mitzvahs and all of their details. We didn't hear 630 mitzvahs and all the details of them, right? That is told to Moshe 40 days on Har Sinai and in the ensuing 40 years, right? Hashem tells Moshe, oh, and this is the detail that you're going to tell them today. That's how it seems to be, right? The entirety of the Torah is not rolled out at Har Sinai, certainly not all of the narrative elements. You know that with certainty. How do you know that the entirety of the Torah was not given to Moshe on Har Sinai? Right. So maybe you say that it's describing things that happen after Har Sinai. Well, it describes his own death. It also describes Moshe hitting the rock and being told you don't get to go to Eretz Yisrael. So if the Torah says Moshe's hitting the rock and is not going to Eretz Yisrael, if I'm Moshe and I heard that on Har Sinai, I've got a plan, right? Obviously, that was not told to Moshe at Har Sinai. The Rishonim, everybody deals with these questions, right? These are obvious questions. But what should bother you is how do we know that Moshe doesn't lie about anything thereafter? Yes? I don't know. It's not a very rabbinic question to ask. It's bothersome. How do we know that after Har Sinai, Moshe didn't... The Meshech Chochmah is not the first person to ask this question. You know who asked this question first? Korach. Right? It's like, hey, Moshe, maybe you have an agenda. Maybe what you're saying is not legit. Maybe what you're saying is not like everything from Hashem. Yeah? So Korach gets swallowed in the ground, but like, okay. Maybe there's still pieces of it that are not 100%.
Is pretty convincing. I mean, that's showing that he's consistently with them, which if it weren't true, presumably Hashem would continue the globe.
Right? But maybe there's details that Moshe lied about. Say what? Korach's also a trick. It's a cool one.
No, he's saying the lighting up is a trick too, but possibly. No?
Right?
But like,
So this is a question that the Meshech Chochmah deals with, contends with, on a like a fundamental level. How do you know that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't lie after Har Sinai?
Why can't you simply say that once they understood who Moshe Rabbeinu's level, they understood in that moment that such a person is inherently incapable of lying.
But is that true?
Well, I don't know what's true. I don't know.
So that's the question. So let's see. We'll take another 3 minutes. It says Imkain, Eich tziva Hashem she'aminu la'olam b'Moshe. Ha hakol b'dei shamayim chutz mi'ir shamayim. How do we believe in Moshe? Maybe he, maybe he wanted a night off at some point in time. Maybe he made something up. He says, "Ve'ein hayidiyah machrachas habechira." And fundamental understanding of Jewish philosophy is the fact that Hashem knows something does not make it happen. Hashem does. We don't live in a world of predetermination. Core basis of our philosophy of life is that we are able to make choices. How do you know that, by the way? It's a chiyuv in the Torah. Uvachar tevachayim. You should choose. You have choices. You should choose. Yeah, I'm not getting into the philosophy of predetermination and Yidiyah Mechira, but the Meshech Chochmah effectively says, just know, any Yidiyah Mechrachas Mechira, we don't believe that. Maybe Moshe decided to add something into the Torah. So, this is his answer. He says, Va'al karchin, and therefore we must conclude, that Hashem Shalal mimenu habechira legamre. That Hashem removed Moshe's capacity to make independent choices entirely. Vinishar muchrach kamalachim, and Moshe Rabbeinu is now just as programmed as a malach. Now,
Miriam question?
Yes.
According to Miriam,
Yes.
He wasn't programmed like a malach.
Maybe that was what Miriam needed to learn.
Right.
The question wasn't how do we know, or how did they know that Moshe didn't lie? The question was, how could Hashem say this about Moshe?
Yes.
I misunderstood the
I'm saying, meaning, I said it in the high school version, right? Which is like, how do we know that like Moshe didn't lie afterwards? But there's a fundamental philosophical question, which is, how does Hashem say, believe in Moshe? Forever. Maybe he'll lie. So he says, you must therefore conclude that Moshe Rabbeinu, from Matan Torah onwards, no longer has Bechira Chavshis. At least as pertains to the dissemination of Torah.
That Moshe maybe was saying, who am I? Who said maybe I'll fail? And Hashem was maybe promising him, you can't. I will take away your ability to fail.
Yes.
It's a rough sell as far as with the rock getting punished for the rock, as far as just that.
Yeah, well, we'll get there. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. Yes.
Just enough to mess it up.
Yeah. Like gets turned on for a moment.
Right,
just to now the tie into the parashas is everybody asks the question like, what happened to Paro's freedom of choice? And all the Mepharshim answer, no, Paro had freedom of choice. You know who didn't? Moshe. Hashem removes Moshe's capacity to not be authentic to Torah. Now, this isn't, we'll discuss this and describe this. This is not miraculous. There is a mechanism by which this occurs. That mechanism by which that occurs is essential to our understanding of Yehoshua, because, as the Meshech Chochmah will describe, and we're going to pause now, but as the Meshech Chochmah is going to describe, if Yehoshua, at this point in time, is being told that this is a mitzvah, so then one of two things is true. If Yehoshua is introducing a new mitzvah, or a new understanding of a mitzvah, a new element of the mitzvah, one of two things is true. Either he is a Navi, in which case he is liable to the death penalty, because a Navi is not allowed to introduce a new mitzvah, or he's got a little bit of this too. Yehoshua is a little bit Moshe Rabbeinu in this area. Meshech Chochmah does. And that, Be'ez Hashem, we will continue with next week. We'll see you later.
Because it's
We're very basic.